She wasn't who he thought she was, not even close. The retired sheriff, Ronald Becker, walked into the courtroom that morning in cuffs, the weight of a decade together heavier than the metal on his wrists. Flashing across the screen, "Sheriff kills wife after gender secret revealed." Voiceover: "After 10 years of marriage, he discovered her deepest secret, and 48 hours later, she was dead." Blackout. Then the question hangs in the silence. What would you have done if you were him? Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. That was just the beginning. Now let's unravel this story from the top. Sheriff Ronald Becker, a respected figure in his quiet Texas county, believed he had built a life rooted in trust and tradition. For 10 years, Becker and his wife, whom he believed to be Karen Becker, had shared everything: their children, their home, their future. He saw their wedding photo as a symbol of that bond, her in a white gown, his badge pinned to his chest. But he had no clue how close he was to losing everything. It was ordinary Tuesday when Ronald stumbled upon a bank statement showing a new credit card in Karen's name. Something tipped him off. A friend's remark about her new identity, whispered in a local diner. Suspicion seeped in slowly, like a faint odor growing stronger. He confronted her that night, voice low, demanding to know why she'd lied. Karen's calm response, "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you," hung in the air like smoke. 2 days later, Ronald entered their bedroom just after dawn. He held the gun that had been tucked in their nightstand for years. Tension crackled. In one moment of destruction, he shot her. Courtroom videos show him standing alone, vest stripped of law enforcement insignia, watched by a packed bench. The charge: murder. The defense hinged on betrayal, identity, and years of secrecy. But jurors had to ask themselves, does deception justify death? This small Texas town, with its dusty roads and Sunday morning barbecues, would never be the same. News outlets splashed headlines: "Sheriff kills wife after gender secret revealed." Viewers debated on social media. Was Becker a victim of deception or prey to intolerance? As the trial unfolded, testimonies revealed a massive gulf between what Ronald believed and the reality Karen concealed. Friends described her as gentle, caring, quietly anxious about Ronald's expectations. Neighbors recalled her soft voice, her love for gardening, and the stark shift that came when Ronald learned her truth. Now, in that same courtroom where he once administered justice, Ronald sat stripped of authority. Witnesses described the moment he learned her secret and the unraveling that followed. Evidence showed his life, once ordered and disciplined, unraveling in 2 days of confusion, grief, and rage. The question for the jury: murder or tragedy born of betrayal? As we move forward, consider this. In marriage, what is truth? And when the foundations crack, what is justice? Now let's unpack the heart of our next sequence. The questions that echo in the courtroom and through every whispered conversation in that tiny Texas town. Who was Alicia Becker really? 10 years ago, she walked down the aisle as Karen, a devoted wife with a gentle smile and dreams of family life. But behind closed doors, she carried a secret identity, an identity she protected at all costs. Was this secret born from fear or necessity? Was she hiding from the world or from Ronald? Did Ronald know all along? Could a decorated sheriff, a man sworn to protect, have sensed that something was off? Perhaps he noticed subtle hints: an unusual hesitation, a carefully chosen wardrobe, a hidden note tucked in a drawer. The envelope opened that Tuesday evening when Ronald discovered a new card issued to Alicia J. Becker set everything in motion. What else had he overlooked? And then there's the climax. What crossed the line and pushed him over the edge? The 2 days between discovery and the fatal shot have become the most scrutinized hours of this case. Was it rage, betrayal, confusion, or heartbreak that tore away years of trust in an instant? Imagine the headline spinning out. Who was she really? What was she hiding? And why did he pull the trigger? These questions flashed across newspapers and played endlessly on social feeds, each one gnawing at those who sought answers. As we peel back layers, you'll hear voices, friends, family, neighbors, each offering fragments of truth and contradiction. Wedding photos betray smiles that now feel staged. A mugshot, out of focus, stares back at a woman the public never knew. Newsprint sits dog-eared on kitchen tables, each snippet more haunting than the last. Over the next segment, we'll examine the timeline, trace the emotional unraveling, and expose the secret that drove a trusted lawman to take a life. But first, keep those questions close. Who was Alicia Becker beneath the title of wife? Could Ronald have lived with the secret? And when all was revealed, why did he aim the gun? Ronald Becker was a man of order, a decorated sheriff born and raised in the dry hills of rural Texas, where Sunday service wasn't optional and your word meant everything. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before returning home to wear the badge his father once wore. In the sheriff's department, he was known for his unflinching sense of duty, his crisp uniforms, and a strict belief in right and wrong. People respected him, feared him even, not for brutality, but for the clarity of his convictions. He didn't bend, he didn't bluff. So when he met Alicia Monroe, it was as if the world, chaotic, complicated, suddenly made sense. They met at a church fundraiser. Ronald had just spoken to the congregation about drug prevention and was ladling stew into paper bowls when he saw her. Alicia, tall, graceful, dressed in a modest navy dress. She smiled with a softness that cut straight through the rigid shell Ronald wore around most people. She complimented his sermon. He offered to walk her to her car, and by the end of that first conversation, she felt familiar, safe. Within a month, they were inseparable. Their courtship was swift, almost storybook. Alicia moved into his modest home on the outskirts of town within 3 months. The wedding came just 6 months after that. There were whispers. Friends said Ronald had never moved so fast, but most chalked it up to love at first sight. Alicia never talked much about her past. She said her family had disowned her for reasons she didn't like to relive. She claimed she'd moved to Texas for a fresh start, and Ronald, who prized loyalty above all, respected her silence. They made a striking couple. He in his uniform, boots polished to a mirror shine. She in floral dresses and pearls, the image of poise and devotion. Their home was always spotless. Alicia cooked everything from scratch, southern casseroles, peach cobbler, smoked brisket, and every Sunday they hosted a dinner for neighbors, church elders, and Ronald's deputies. Guests praised her hospitality. They said she was the kind of wife you didn't see anymore. For years, life seemed perfect. Ronald rose through the ranks, eventually becoming sheriff. Alicia volunteered at the church and taught literacy at the local library. The couple appeared in town parades, handed out candy on Halloween, posed together in Christmas cards that adorned dozens of refrigerators across the county. But even then, cracks, fine hairline fractures, began to form. No one could quite explain why Alicia's past was so tightly sealed. She had no family at the wedding, not a single relative, no childhood friends. When Ronald asked about old photo albums, she'd laugh and say they were lost in a flood. When he pressed her about medical records for insurance or checkups, she'd delay, offering excuses, paperwork mix-ups, scheduling conflicts, a fear of hospitals. At first, Ronald chalked it up to trauma. She said she had a difficult upbringing. He wanted to protect her, not pry. But over time, those delays and deflections began to gnaw at him. There were no baby pictures, no high school yearbooks. Once she refused a flu shot at the sheriff's department health fair. She whispered something to the nurse and left early. Ronald noticed but said nothing. His trust in Alicia was deep, so deep that confronting her felt like betraying her. So he stayed quiet, for years. Still, the little doubts lingered. She avoided doctor visits altogether. Her driver's license showed a recent issue date, and the social security number on her marriage documents led to a file that seemed new, She told him it was the result of a legal name change and starting over. He accepted it because Alicia was kind. Alicia was generous. Alicia lit candles when he came home late and massaged his shoulders when the weight of his job bore down on him. By all accounts, she was the perfect woman. But no one is perfect, and secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of clawing their way to the surface. The story is only just beginning. Because perfection, it comes at a cost. Sheriff Ronald Becker's world had always revolved around order and transparency. But over the months following their perfect years together, small cracks began to form, and suspicion gnawed at his conscience. It started with an innocuous moment, returning home early one afternoon to find Alicia Monroe's car already in the driveway. He'd expected quiet. Instead, he discovered a locked bathroom door, a space that had never been off limits before. Inside, he found a small bottle of prescription medication hidden beneath towels. The label bore a name he didn't recognize, another identity he had never been told about. He studied the documents on their kitchen counter one evening. Alicia's driver's license had a distinct issue date just 10 years ago, but the photograph, though beautiful, didn't look like the woman he thought he knew. He remembered the day he first met her at that church fundraiser. Now, every memory felt stretched and false. The envelope arrived in the mail, a thick packet of paperwork showing multiple aliases and one birth certificate under a different name entirely. Ronald's training kicked in. Every instinct, every cell in his body screamed that something was off. He waited until dinner. She was friendly, pouring wine, arranging flowers. He watched her survive the questions. No jitter, no tears. And then, with the mask still in place, she begged him not to search the rest. "Please don't do this," she whispered, hands trembling. He saw her fear, real and raw, but beneath it he saw something else. Resolve. That night, in their bedroom, he confronted her in hushed tones, voice cracking with emotion. He told her he needed the truth. What she did next shook him even more. She cried, like a woman afraid of losing him, but didn't answer. She begged him to let it be. What he should have done next was call the county clerk, investigate quietly. Instead, he found himself sitting in their living room at 2 a.m, scrolling through phone records, cross-referencing photographs, piecing together a financial history that didn't belong to him. The woman he loved had a backstory she refused to share, and as sheriff, Ronald knew secrets could kill a person. But this felt different. In the harsh corner light, he noticed her anxiety had grown. She flinched at sudden movements, avoided his gaze, offered explanations with practiced calm. Each denial felt like a lie. Ronald tried to remember the townspeople's remarks, that she never discussed her past, that no one knew her family, that she vanished when illness struck once and never came back. They'd all accepted her solemn silence. But now he couldn't. The tension built over days. He confronted her again one evening after church before the weekly Bible study. He said, "I found the medicine. I saw the names." She backed away, tears glistening, voice trembling as she said, "I did this so we could be together. I just wanted a life with you." His heart lurched between rage and heartbreak. He asked her who she was, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. As the hours wore on, Ronald's suspicion shifted to certainty. This wasn't just a secret. This was a foundation built on lies. As sheriff, he taught that deception leads to chaos, undermines trust, fractures communities. But when the betrayal shattered his own life, he no longer lived by the rules. And if there was one thing he couldn't stand, it was a lie. He slept little. He drank coffee from dawn until dusk, reading through pages of court records, name changes, birth certificates. He knew that once this truth came out, nothing would ever be the same. For him, for Alicia, for the whole county. Then one night, quiet descended on their home. He stood in the hallway outside their room, the gun heavy in his hand, the same sidearm he'd relied on to protect others. For years, that firearm had represented safety. Now it carried the weight of everything he thought he treasured. He paused. He remembered the courtroom, the badge gone from his chest, the headlines, "Sheriff kills wife after gender secret revealed." Those words swirled in his mind, their finality striking. He took a slow breath. Because Ronald Becker wasn't just a man broken by betrayal. He was a man compelled by law, by order, by a need to uncover truth. And that need would lead him down a path from protector to perpetrator. But Ronald was a sheriff. He couldn't ignore a mystery, even in his own home. The morning after the confrontation, Ronald Becker sat alone in his truck, parked in the farthest corner of the county records office. He hadn't slept. The previous night had left him with more questions than answers, and the only thing that made sense anymore was protocol. He logged into the department system, not as a sheriff searching for a suspect, but as a husband searching for the truth. The name on her driver's license matched her marriage certificate, Alicia Monroe. But behind that name, Ronald unearthed something he had not been prepared for. The digital trail was faint but traceable. Buried legal filings, court petitions, sealed medical forms. Then it appeared, Anthony Monroe, born in Ohio, 1978. Male. A name she had once lived with, and one Ronald had never heard spoken aloud. She had transitioned nearly 12 years before they met. The change was complete. Legal, medical, social. By the time Alicia Monroe walked into his life at that church fundraiser, her past had been quietly rewritten, but it had never disappeared. Ronald stared at the screen for nearly half an hour, unmoving. The cursor blinked back at him like a heartbeat, steady and cruel. His hand trembled as he closed the window. The truth didn't come with comfort. It came with collapse. For a man whose life had been built on moral clarity, Ronald now found himself lost in questions that didn't fit neatly into the laws he upheld. What did this make their marriage? What did it make him? Was the last decade a lie, or was it love distorted by omission? He returned home briefly. Alicia wasn't there. The house, usually warm and fragrant with the scent of something baking, now felt cold, lifeless. He walked through each room in silence. The family photos on the mantel, the wedding picture above the fireplace, the note Alicia had left by the coffee pot. "I'm going to the library. I love you." All of it mocked him. Then he vanished. For 48 hours, Sheriff Ronald Becker, a man who had never missed a morning briefing, who always answered his radio, was unreachable. His badge was left behind in the drawer. His service pistol was gone. The deputies assumed he was handling a personal matter. They didn't know the scale of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Alicia Monroe called her closest friend in a whisper. Her voice cracked. "He knows," she said. "I think he's going to hurt me." The friend urged her to leave, to find safety, but Alicia refused. "He just needs time," she said. "He's not a violent man." The following morning, a neighbor called 911. She hadn't seen Alicia pick up her paper. The front door was ajar. Something about the silence felt wrong. She didn't go inside. When officers arrived, they found Alicia in the living room, motionless, a single gunshot wound to the chest. No sign of forced entry, no struggle. The coffee pot was still warm. The wedding photo still hung above the fireplace. On the table beside her was Ronald's wedding ring, his badge, and a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope, a handwritten letter. Scrawled in uneven lines, it read, "She lied to me. She took everything I was and made me doubt it. I loved her. God help me. I loved her." The discovery shocked even the most hardened detectives. Many had known Ronald personally. Some had eaten at that very dinner table. Few could reconcile the man they served with the act he had committed. The town reeled, not just from the murder, but from the layers of secrecy that had unraveled to get there. The sheriff's department, now handling an investigation against one of their own, faced immense pressure. Media descended quickly. Headlines screamed across the country. "Texas sheriff kills wife over transgender secret." Politicians weighed in. Activists marched on both sides, but behind the noise, behind the headlines, was a quieter, more painful truth. Two people, deeply entangled in love and silence, had collided in a way that neither could survive. In the following days, forensic teams combed through their home. They found Ronald's truck abandoned near a dried-out lake bed. The murder weapon was inside. No note, no sign of struggle, just silence. Ronald was apprehended 2 days later, walking barefoot down a county road 30 miles from home. His face was sunburnt, his hands scraped, his eyes hollow. When officers approached, he didn't resist. He simply held up both hands and said, "I need to talk to God." In the days that followed, the full weight of what had happened began to settle. The sheriff's department released a statement. Alicia's friends held a vigil, and the town, once so sure of its values, its heroes, and its truths, now sat in painful reflection. Because what Ronald uncovered didn't just destroy his marriage, it destroyed everything he thought he understood about himself. And when that happened, when identity cracked against identity, the only thing left behind was tragedy. The official police report was stark. Alicia Monroe was found lying on her side in the master bedroom of their modest ranch-style home, dressed in a soft blue robe, 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. No signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, just her, alone, beside the bed she once shared with the man she loved. The coroner later testified that the shots were fired from close range, no more than 6 feet away, and that death would have been almost immediate. On the dresser, a half-empty glass of water, her reading glasses folded neatly on a Bible, and beneath that Bible, a letter, unfinished. 4 words were scrawled across the top line. "I didn't mean to." When Sheriff Ronald Becker turned himself in at the county jail just hours later, his uniform was gone. He wore jeans, an old hoodie, and no shoes. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't request water. He simply sat down, stared at the booking officer, and said, "She lied to me for 10 years. The small Texas town that once revered him now found itself split at the seams. The man they called Sheriff Becker had been their protector, their neighbor, their friend. But now he was something else entirely, an accused killer. The mugshot swept through social media like wildfire. News crews camped outside the courthouse. Protesters gathered in the square, some holding signs with Alicia's name. Others wore shirts that read, "He was deceived." He snapped. The courtroom was tense from the moment the trial began. A former sheriff on trial for murder was headline news, but it was the story behind the shooting that divided a nation. Prosecutors painted a clear picture. Alicia Monroe was murdered in cold blood by a man who couldn't accept her truth. They presented her friend's text messages, the 911 call, the medical records, the evidence of careful planning. They described Ronald's 48-hour disappearance not as shock or sorrow, but as calculated flight. But Ronald's defense attorney told a very different story. He described a man undone, not by hate, but by betrayal. A man who had built his identity on tradition, structure, and moral certainty, only to learn that the very foundation of his most intimate relationship had been obscured from the beginning. He brought in psychologists who testified that Ronald experienced a dissociative break, an acute collapse of reality triggered by the revelation of Alicia's past. This wasn't murder, his attorney argued. This was a man shattered to his core by a truth he wasn't prepared to face. The jury sat in stony silence as both sides made their case. Alicia's childhood doctor testified, confirming her full medical transition over a decade earlier. She had legally changed her name, rebuilt her life, and, according to friends, lived in fear of losing Ronald if he ever found out. She chose silence, they said, because she believed love would be stronger than truth. And for years, it was. One of the most harrowing moments came when Ronald took the stand. He spoke slowly, voice hoarse, pausing between sentences as though each word weighed 100 pounds. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God, I didn't know." He wept when shown their wedding photo. He didn't flinch when prosecutors held up images of the crime scene. "I loved her," he said. "I thought I knew her. I thought I knew myself." Across the courtroom, Alicia's cousin watched through tears. "She just wanted to be loved," she whispered to a reporter. "That's all she ever wanted." The town became a battleground of belief. Was Ronald a monster hiding behind a badge, or a man broken by deception? Was this murder, or the consequence of a truth withheld too long? Outside the courthouse, the arguments mirrored the trial. People quoted scripture, others quoted civil rights law. Some said Alicia should have told him from the beginning. Others said it wasn't his right to know unless she chose to share. Lines were drawn, friendships ended, families argued over dinner tables. Because this wasn't just about a shooting, it was about identity, about love, about the limits of truth and the cost of silence. And hovering over it all was a single piercing question, one that echoed in the courtroom, the headlines, the whispered conversations across the nation. Was this justice or prejudice masquerading as rage? The jury would have to decide, but the damage had already been done. 2 lives destroyed, a town forever changed, a truth that refused to stay buried. The final day of trial came like the closing of a long, bitter winter. The courtroom, packed with journalists, neighbors, former colleagues, and strangers drawn in by the weight of the case, sat hushed as the jury returned to their seats. It had taken them only 7 hours to reach a decision. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and read the verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Ronald Becker showed no visible reaction. He didn't flinch. He didn't look to the side, didn't seek out a familiar face in the crowd. He stood as he always had, shoulders square, jaw set. The same man who once commanded respect with every step through a sheriff's office now stood stripped of his badge, reduced to a prisoner in the eyes of the law. The sentence 20 years in a state correctional facility, eligible for parole in 2040. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom, but Alicia's words spoke louder. In the weeks after the trial, her family made public several letters Alicia had written but never mailed. Letters she had written to Ronald, some dated years ago, others just days before her death. In one, she wrote, "I have carried this truth for so long, not out of shame, but out of fear. Fear that I would lose you. Fear that you would see me as less. You never asked, and I told myself that meant you accepted all of me. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to speak. I wish I had told you the day we met. I wish I believed you could have loved me anyway." The letters didn't change the outcome, but they painted the full picture. Alicia hadn't deceived for sport or control. She'd simply hoped, desperately, that love could be enough. In the weeks and months that followed, the town slowly began to confront itself. Church sermons shifted, town hall meetings grew heated. For some, Ronald remained a tragic figure, a man overwhelmed by a reality he was never prepared to face. For others, he was a murderer, no different than any other man who took a life because he felt his own sense of control slip away. The debate wasn't just about the crime. It became about truth. About who deserves to know what and when. About the fragile identity of masculinity in towns where the lines between manhood, faith, and dominance are drawn with razor-thin precision. About what happens when shame isn't healed, but hidden. Because Ronald Becker wasn't just betrayed, he was challenged. His understanding of love, of gender, of his own identity had been uprooted. And instead of confronting it, he chose to destroy it. In interviews, former deputies spoke cautiously. "He was a good man," one said, "but even good men break if they don't know how to carry the weight." Others weren't so forgiving. Alicia's cousin, who stood every day in that courtroom, said, "He chose pride over compassion. He chose violence over vulnerability. That's not justice, that's cowardice." What this story left behind was a wake of uncomfortable truths, about how tightly people hold to their beliefs, about how silence, even in love, can rot everything beneath the surface, about the price people pay when they are forced to hide their past just to feel safe. Alicia Monroe lived quietly. She loved deeply, and she died for a secret that never should have cost her life. And Ronald Becker? He will wake each day in a concrete cell. 20 years to sit with what he did. 20 years to think about the woman he claimed to love. 20 years to confront a truth that, had he faced it with courage instead of rage, might have saved them both. Because in the end, it wasn't a gun that ended this story. It was fear of the truth and of what it meant. Ronald Becker will be eligible for parole in 2040. Would you have forgiven her? Would you have sat across the table from Alicia Monroe, your wife of 10 years, and tried to understand why she hid something so fundamental? Or would you have done what Ronald Becker did? That's the question that still haunts this case. It goes beyond the headlines, beyond the trial, beyond the sentence. It cuts into the rawest corners of the human heart. Trust, identity, truth, and the consequences of silence. Ronald believed his marriage was built on honesty, faith, and love. And when one of those pillars cracked, he didn't just walk away. He destroyed everything that had been built around it. But does deception, however personal, however painful, ever justify murder? Was Ronald reacting as a betrayed husband? Or as a man so bound by a rigid sense of identity and masculinity that he couldn't make room for anything outside of it? Some call it rage. Others say it was heartbreak. The jury called it second-degree murder. But justice? That depends on who you ask. The truth is, Ronald Becker didn't just kill Alicia Monroe. He killed the version of himself that couldn't tolerate being vulnerable, the version that had to be in control, had to have all the answers. And maybe that's why this story doesn't sit easily in any category. It's not just about gender, or law, or marriage. It's about the terrifying uncertainty that can come when we realize the people closest to us are not exactly who we believed, and what we do with that realization. So, what do you think? Can deception ever justify murder? Was justice truly served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Was Ronald a victim of betrayal, or was Alicia the only one betrayed in the end? And if you thought this story was shocking, wait until you hear about the newlywed wife who stabbed her husband on their honeymoon. That story's next. Before we go, don't forget, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.